Look just at those few weeks since Brexit happened, and look at what happened here. The effects, were first one way, then there's been capital that's flowed in. I think it's a bit ambiguous what the market effects are, not only here, but in much of the world where equity prices fell and they've revived. The question of the longer run impact, since Brexit hasn't really happened, the vote has happened, but now the negotiation of the terms of the actual exit will take some time. There is a question of how that uncertainty will play out, and whether that will have a large or a small impact. We see the most significant impacts coming in the UK and in the European Union, with far smaller impacts more further afield with respect to investment and growth prospects. So here our revision for 2017 was quite small.
We are reminded, from time to time by a government, business and labour year in South Africa that they are talking about jobs and growth. But it's been months now, and those tangible measures, as the IMF calls it, seem to be elusive to us. What should we be seeing by now? Because we have this rating agency's decision coming up in December. What are those tangible measures that we should be seeing?
As I mentioned in the talk that I just gave, there is a good national development plan. It is filled with great ideas. It includes as well a roster of very important potential infrastructure plans. I think what's most important is that the most favorable elements of the NDP be implemented, and this should be a time for implementation. Now, one can imagine some time and some deliberation on a subject so complex, but it's been a while, and it's one thing when growth is 3.5, but now with lower growth and lower growth prospects, I think there's a greater urgency to be implementing that plan, working concretely on steps that will promote jobs and growth, and as I've been arguing, steps that will do so in a way that begins to absorb the excluded 1/3 of the population.
So I've noticed you've mentioned quite a bit about anti-competitive behaviour in South Africa among companies and how that impedes growth. How serious is it?
Well, it's very hard to quantify, but I think that when one looks at both government regulations and policies, when one looks at the concentration of business in certain sectors, whether it's in finance or in manufacturing, when one looks at the mandates that state-owned enterprises have, which often preclude or limit the extent to which private enterprise can compete with them, and when one looks at just the facts that small and medium enterprise growth is low, where in many countries it's a source of strength and growth, and that there's not much of a record of the medium enterprise becoming the medium to large or the large enterprise, that there's something that ought to be done.
2 to 2.5% growth in 5 years' time for South Africa, that's what you mentioned. Just talk to me about the path to that.
Well, it's very hard to know the path, but we see, as we've said publicly, 1/10 of a point, so almost no growth this year, a little over 1% next year, and then gradually rising to the 2.5% range. When I've spoken to bankers during my visit and asked them about their analyst forecasts, they aren't terribly different. So I don't consider that this is a terribly controversial forecast. I think it is a sobering forecast, and since it is a widely shared view, it should be taken by everyone here, whether government, banks, business, labor, social partners, as a call to action.
One can only imagine that if we do not implement those structural reforms as adequately as we would want to, we might not even see that 2 to 2.5% growth in 5 years.
Well, it's your country is operating in a very uncertain global environment, and we don't know whether the globe may surprise on the up or the downsides. But the recent developments have shown that the unexpected in a number of cases has happened. There are uncertainties that remain over Brexit and other geopolitical question marks around the globe. So it's not a time to be complacent.
At the same time, the IMF's World Economic Outlook now expects only a 3.1% global growth this year. It says the UK will be the worst affected of all the advanced economies. The IMF cut its global growth forecast for the next 2 years, citing uncertainty over Britain's looming exit from the European Union. The move included a nearly 4 percentage point reduction in the UK's 2017 growth forecast. The IMF says it now expects global GDP to grow at 3.1% in 2016 and at 3.4% in 2017. And that despite recent improvements in Japan and Europe and a partial recovery in commodity prices, the UK's Brexit vote has increased uncertainty.